everybody. Welcome back to CELPIP Live. Let's quickly go into our trivia question for the day because it is a good one. Okay, September's full moon is known as a harvest moon. What Canadian musician released an album called Harvest Moon? Let me know the answers in the comments below. The person that answers the quickest I'll share your answers on the screen. Okay, without further ado, let's get into our show. If you're new here, CELPIP Live was created to help CELPIP test takers like you understand a little bit more about the CELPIP test. So if you're planning to write the test, or if you know somebody who's planning to write the test, please share this channel with them and ask them to subscribe so they are updated with our future episodes. In today's episode, we're talking about comprehension skills for your reading test. Comprehension skills are just crucial for your test, of course, but then also your life in general. So let's go welcome our favorite guest. Hello, how are you? Welcome to our show.
Hello, Ashwati. Hello to our viewers as well. Thank you for having me back. I'm excited about today's episode because recently we've had so many requests from our viewers for some extra help with the reading test, as it is tricky. So I prepared a special lesson for us all today, and I'm excited to get started with it. Shall I share my screen now? Let's put that up and see how we go. All right. Great. So we're going to focus on we're going to do some warm-up activities that actually allow us to understand what reading comprehension and inference skills are all about. So let me start off by explaining what I mean when I say inference skills, because these are intermediate to advanced level reading skills, and we need some strategies to be able to demonstrate them well on our own CELPIP reading tests. So when you're working your way through your own reading test, you are going to, at times, encounter questions that are inference type. So what that means is the 4 multiple choice answer choices in front of you are not going to have been stated directly in the reading passage. So instead, what happens is you need to fully understand what you've been reading about, and you need to connect with that passage to then make some assumptions and draw some conclusions so that you can select the answer choice that makes the most logical sense. And of course, making inference skills or educated guesses about the material is an intermediate to advanced level skill that does take practice. But the more we practice, the more accurate our inferences become. And then the better, hopefully, we'll do on our CELPIP reading test. So here's what I'm going to do with us all today. I'm going to start off by giving us a couple of warm-up activities. We're going to be working with both pictures today and with passages involving words and sentences, because you'll need to, you will encounter both of those activities on your CELPIP reading test. And I'm going to suggest here that these 2 skills that I've listed on screen are crucial in allowing you to form your basic understanding of what you're reading first, so that fully understanding it, you can answer your questions correctly. So we're going to use our own prior knowledge of the world and the way it works, and our own experiences with similar situations as we read. If you can put yourself in the shoes of the people you're reading about, you'll understand the material much more readily. Context clues as well are crucial because they're the details, the particular details, whether you're looking at a picture or a passage with words. You need to know which words are relevant that will give you the background information to understand so you can answer your questions effectively. So we're going to start off with a fun activity as a warm-up. This is an image that was generated by ChatGPT. So I encourage all of you at home, if you're looking for other ways to practice your reading comprehension skills. All I did, you can do this too. You can go into ChatGPT or whatever AI platform you'd like to use. And I just said, ChatGPT, please give me an image that we can use to practice inference skills. And this is the image that it gave to us. And it's a really good one, because what I'd like us all to do together right now is use our own prior knowledge, our own understanding of the way the world works to look at this picture. And I'm going to ask you a couple of very basic questions. Now, if you've taken any of my Zoom webinars in the past, you'll have heard me mention the 5 W's time and again. So whenever we're looking at pictures on the test, whether we're reading words, we need to be able to understand the who, what, where, when, and why. If you can grab those 5 W's of information, you'll be in a very good position to answer more questions effectively. So my very first question, I think, is an easy one. Can all of you watching please look at the picture in front of you and tell us in the live chat here what room these people are in? Where are they? Where is this scene taking place? Again, this is entry level. This is not intermediate advanced. This is just a basic assessment. So I'll maybe rely on Ashwati to share out a few answers as they come in. But I'm looking for the where. Where are these people? Should be an easy question to answer, but let's start there and we'll work our way up. Yeah.
I was so excited when you said this. I quickly went to ChatGPT and used the prompt to give me an inference scale, and it created almost a similar image. I'm pretty sure it's the same room, but it's a different view. Anyway, so we've got a bunch of answers already, and they're all pretty accurate. So living room, living room,
Yep.
living room. Living room.
That's good. And again, that's why I mentioned this should be done quickly. And most people looking at this, the way we understand or assume that this is a living room is because you can see people sitting on a couch or a sofa. There's a coffee table in front of them. There's a bay window with on them. So I think a lot of us understand however our own apartment or home is set up, most of us would have a living room that looks similar to this perhaps anyway. So we can use our own prior knowledge of our own environment to connect with this. So that's a basic question. Can we now go to the who of the situation? This is so important, especially on your CELPIP test. So you see 2 people here in the scene sitting on the couch. Clearly they're reading newspapers, it looks like. I'd like to know who you think they are in relationship to each other. There's no way you can guess their names. Nobody is that good, right? Without the proper context clues. Oh. But I think if you look here, you should be able to determine if they're related, and if so, how. And Ashwati, you're welcome to play along if you want.
No, that's really such a good question. Did you, so like I was on my phone, if you saw, I was like looking at the image that that ChatGPT created for me, and I was like, there's a pet in that as well. So I was just trying to find out the similarities. That's a cat, but whatever, like it's a different idea. But it's so interesting. It's almost exactly the same room with the exact same curtains and the couch and everything. But yeah, I'm waiting. Okay, great. We have some answers. So we have father and daughter, father and daughter, father and daughter. Somebody said a couple, daughter and dad.
Right.
Dad and daughter with their pet. Yeah.
Okay. So most of you are thinking it's a father and daughter. I think that's one very strong possibility. It possibly could be a grandfather and granddaughter. It really depends, again, on how you're assessing the clues in front of you. So again, the point I'm making is when you're starting out, remember, we're just looking at this image for the first time. So we're gathering just the basic information. So we want to start connecting and making these guesses or inferences in our mind. And then as we continue to read a passage throughout the test, we should be able to gather more details that will either tell us that our guesses were correct, or we may have to revise them slightly. But I agree with all of you who are suggesting that this is probably a family situation. And that's for maybe 2 or even 3 reasons. First off, the fact that they're sitting on the same couch in the same living room reading together tells me that they're very likely family or they're related. I don't think you'd have a neighbor pop by to read a newspaper and so on. I think that they're family, so that's a very good starting point. Clearly, there's an age difference between these 2 people. So the man has grayer hair, and if you look at his face, you'll notice some wrinkles. So those are clues that tell us he's quite a bit older than the girl to his right, who has smoother skin, darker hair in a ponytail, so that's a more youthful style as well. He's wearing formal clothes, so that again tells us, perhaps anyway, that he's a little bit older. She's wearing a casual sweater. So again, I would say, yeah, maybe father, daughter. If you think the man is quite a bit older than this girl, it might even suggest grandfather, granddaughter. I think both of those guesses are accurate for now. Again, we'd have to gather more information down the road to confirm that. So those are your basics, the where, the who, what are they doing? So this is using our own knowledge of who's in our life, what environments we have around us to help us understand the scene. Okay, I'm going to take you deeper now. So this is entry-level stuff. Let's move up to a more intermediate approach to gathering the right information to answer some harder questions. I would like you to look very closely now at this picture, and I'd like you to guess in the chat box, make an assumption to tell me what language you think these two people speak. And I'll leave that with you for now. Ashwati,
Wow.
I also encourage you to get into this. What do you think?
Should I answer it? I'll wait for the comments.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
You have to know where to look.
They speak English, and I'm basing that off of the fact that they're reading English newspapers.
No, they're not.
No,
Nope.
I'm not
That
reading
would be an incorrect inference. Why are they reading English newspapers? Look at the headlines on the newspapers. Tell me what you see. Does that look like English to you?
It doesn't look like anything to me. Oh wait, is it Greek? I'm so confused. Not English then.
That's exactly my point, Ashwati. Yeah. So for those of you looking, you see they're reading. One of two things is happening. You might make the assumption because this is a CELPIP is a test for English language. So sometimes we just assume, oh, they must be reading English because that's what we're talking about today. We cannot jump to that type of conclusion. We always have to look at the details given to us. And when you look very carefully at the newspaper headlines, I frankly don't know what language that is. It's not one I'm familiar with in my own life. Perhaps you speak that language and you can tell us in the chat box. But what I can tell you with 100% certainty is that the headlines there are not using English letters or characters. So whatever language these people are reading, it's not English. So that much we know. So again, that's just a starting point. And most likely, if this was a story you were reading, you would gather more information as you went along that would confirm for you likely what language it is.
Sorry, I just wanted to, because we're talking about this, a lot of the comments have very specific reasons as to why they assume that it was English language. One is the meal that is in front of their table, in front of them, suggests that they are English, as in like from England. And then also because somebody else said English because of newspaper, like I thought. And then somebody else said because of bread and tea culture of the British. So yeah, a lot of this is very like I would say this is inferring in a way.
Yeah. So I really like the way you're connecting. I think that is a bit of a stereotype, but I think it's a true one. Where we look at tea time, it is very strongly associated with the British culture. And in Britain, in England, of course, they speak English. I like to drink tea too, though, and I was born and raised in Canada. So again, I caution you to make I call those overgeneralizations. They're sort of sweeping assumptions we make without looking at the relevant details. So starting off by saying this looks like they might be in England, given the tea. But then it's up to you to really look closely and recognize, wait a minute, I was wrong. The headlines on the newspapers, I don't know what language that is, but it's not English. So there's no way there's maybe they do speak English as another language, but clearly whatever language is their first language, it's not English. So again, the person who's the efficient, effective reader is one who can start off with inferences and know to adjust them as they gather more details. And that's sort of the point of today's episode. And we're going to be doing that quite a bit. I've got one last question, if I may. I want you to tell me a when detail now in the chat box. So looking at the scene in front of you, can you hazard a guess as to how long these two people have been reading their newspapers on the couch? You can estimate in minutes or hours if you'd like, or you can just be general about it and say, maybe you think they just started to read, maybe they've been there all afternoon. So I'm just curious how you would give a time frame for this activity. What do you think? How long has it been going on, would you say?
Half an hour. Somebody said half an hour. That's very specific.
Okay, maybe
30 minutes.
Okay, I've got a different idea, but let's hear what you have to say first.
This is so interesting. I'm really glad to be a part of this because I have I can't, how am I going to assess time? Like, there's no way for me to, I can say it's like before evening for sure because there's light out, but how do we know how long?
Yeah, it's definitely the afternoon or daytime, right? You're right about that. I see the daylight in the window behind us for sure. But again, half an hour, possibly. I think it's actually quite a bit shorter than that. Do we have any other guesses?
Given that, somebody said starting.
I think so too. And now we have to explain why. So making the inference, that's the first step. And that sometimes is the easy step. The hard part is explaining why you feel that way. You always have to back up your inferences with evidence from the scene. And I would agree with the person that says, I think this activity is just beginning, and here's why. If you look at the teacup on the saucer in the foreground closest to us, you can see it has just been poured. You can see that the tea is pretty much at the top of the rim, which means it has hardly been drunk at all. So it's a fresh cup. Even that glass of juice there closer to the girl, there's only about 1.5 inches gone from the juice at the top. And that tells me that she's probably had a few sips. So she's just sort of started drinking. And the sandwich as well. It only has maybe 1/4 of the sandwich missing. So whoever made that sandwich and put it there, you know, they just started to enjoy their relaxed time. Even the clothes the man is wearing, I assume that, I don't know where he works. He looks like he could be a professor. He's got the tie and the shirt collar and almost like a cardigan over that and a vest. That's very formal, almost business attire. So I'm assuming perhaps that he's just come home from work. And what do we do when we come home from work sometimes is we sit and relax first, and then we might get into some leisure clothes and go on with our day. So there's lots of information here that you can pull at. And when you put them all together, it paints a picture. So I think we've got a better case to support that this activity is just starting instead of trying to suggest that it's been already happening for 30 minutes to an hour. All right. And again, we won't know for sure until we maybe continue to read a passage. We might get more info there. But at a first glance, these are the types of details that I want you to notice. All right. It's kind of fun too. It's like a word puzzle. So I encourage you to use your own AI or ChatGPT, generate some images, and you can have these discussions with your study partners or just think about your ideas on your own. But the more you notice these things, the easier it's going to be for future applications, which is what we're going to do.
It's
Sorry?
like if you, it's like having to, like if you're a detective and you have to read a crime scene, that's how this feels like. You're having to go into like the minutiae of all the details and like
Yes.
really see what was going on.
Yeah, 100%. And I love my true crime shows. So perhaps that's
Me
why I'm
too.
so passionate about these types of activities. I think they're a lot of fun, but they're great for training the mind to notice details and to put the connections together. So we're going to take those exact same skills that we were practicing there with the picture, and we're going to apply them now to a reading part 2 in CELPIP, because that part of your test also gives you pictures and some words to work with. So any passage we read is going to have a main idea, of course. It's up to us to determine what the specific supporting details are. Who, what, where, when, why, right? And making those connections. Looking at the CELPIP part 2, in yellow here, I've got some structural elements that I think are going to help us understand what we're looking at very quickly. So when you see your diagram on your actual test for reading part 2, I want you to look for headings. If you notice that there are any words there that are bigger print, like the size of the font's bigger, maybe they're in a different color or they're bolded or italicized, anything that stands out as different from other words in the diagram, clearly they have to be important. Otherwise, why would they be designed to be different from the other words? So we'll look for the headings, the different colors, any words that might repeat. We're going to try to find patterns. And of course, the pictures themselves, that's part of it. So I'm going to show you, this was a real test question from a past CELPIP test. Normally on your test, it would be top to bottom. But as I wanted you to see the words on screen, I've decided to display the 4 parts of this diagram in a row. Just so you're aware, we have a top and bottom, but we're looking at them sideways for today, for now, so you can see it and work with the material easily. So when you start your CELPIP reading part 2, I would like you to take 20 seconds of time, no more than 30 seconds, to look at the diagram, figure out what it is you're looking at, and then try to determine the types of information you see on screen. I'm going to give you about 20 seconds now of quiet time. I'll stop talking. I want you to do just that, figure out what type of information is here, and then I'll guide us through quickly the patterns, and then we'll get to the test questions. You don't need to type into the chat, just have a look for now. We've got 5 more seconds of time here. That should be more than enough time. Again, on the real test, you have 9 minutes to answer 8 questions. So you don't want to be looking at the diagram for too long of a time, but even just 20 seconds usually gives you the overall sense. So I'm going to use a laser pointer very quickly to point out features that I hope you notice. So first of all, you see pictures. That's the whole point of reading part 2. Now use your prior knowledge of the world. If you are an avid traveler like me, I love to travel. It's one of my favorite things to do. You might just recognize what these pictures are representing if you've been there before. So speaking of a British tea time, some of you might have recognized the red double-decker buses and Big Ben, the famous clock that are in London, England. If you've been to Honolulu, Hawaii, you would recognize Diamond Head as the extinct volcano that many of us climb and hike upon. I have no idea specifically what beach this is, but we can all tell this is a tropical destination. We see palm trees, we see blue-green waters and white sand. And if you've been to Sydney, Australia, you would recognize the Sydney Opera House. So at a very quick glance, the travelers in the crowd like me would know immediately that we're looking at a travel brochure. What else could it possibly be? All of these pictures, the 4 parts of the diagram, are giving us information about possible destinations. Now, if you don't recognize these places, that's okay. You might not be able to use your own prior knowledge of the world. In that case, you're going to have to rely on the specific context clues, the words in the passage. And I hope you noticed right away that the very top line of each part of this diagram, again, it's centered in screen. It's bigger print. The size is bigger than the rest of the words, and it's bolded. It's dark. And there's a pattern. So we always start with the city that we're leaving, and then the city and country we get to, right? And it's like that all the way across. So you can quickly see the words themselves that tell you which destinations are covered, because you're going to have questions to answer in a moment. And certainly those questions will refer to some of this information. So just recognizing where that detail is in the diagram will tell you exactly where to look later on. You can then see the pattern. So how many nights you'll be at each of these destinations. You'll notice there's always a star rating. Some of them are fancier than others. And then the price point, it's in blue print. You can't miss it, right? It's different from all the other words on screen. So if you get a question later that asks you about the most expensive package or the least expensive package, you're going to know to come to the diagram and look just here all the way across, because those are the only details that will matter. So that's how you're going to answer 8 questions in only 9 minutes. You will not have time to read every single part of this diagram slowly and carefully. You need to know where to look, grab the details that are relevant, answer the question, and move on to the next question. That's the name of the game for any test when there's a time requirement. These details, I wouldn't bother reading too much. You could come back to this once you get a question, but you do know there are more specific details here. We also notice the departure times, right? So we leave on this day and we come back on these days. So those are the patterns all the way across. And in 20 seconds here, we should be able to demonstrate those structural elements that we've just discussed. So with that in mind, let's go to the actual test questions now. So the top set of questions for your reading part 2 will always give you a little email. It looks like this. And you'll have 5 questions to answer, and they're all fill in the blank. So what I've done, you may have noticed, question 1 is here, 2, 3, and 4. So when you answer a question and you click on the correct answer, or the answer you think is correct, the computer inserts it for you in green print to complete the sentence. So as you can see, I've already completed the first 4 answers, because what I want us to do, rather what I want you to do, is I want to answer question 5 as a group. This is the inference question, and it's the most challenging question of this particular test set. So that's why I've left it open. So I know this is a reading test, and you'd have to read this by yourself on test day. But for right now, I'd like to read it to you aloud so we can all follow along. Just try to gather the details. You can see that Marian is the writer of this email. Her name's at the bottom, and she's writing to Sam up top. So I'll read this email out loud, and when we get to question 5, I'm going to open up the 4 answer choices, and I will give you approximately 40 seconds to answer this question all on your own. After you've had a chance to work it through, we'll discuss it. There is a little bit of logic and reasoning that comes into play here. So I want to see how well you can handle it on your own first. So Marian writes, "Hi, Sam. I've dug up 4 travel packages that would earn us 10 times the regular Jet Miles points. Surprisingly, the cheapest package also features unlimited food and drinks. However, it's hard to get a sense of value for the money, because even though all the trips include all taxes and fees, as well as 2-way travel, There's a lot of variety in terms of what's included in the price. Remember, soon we'll be away from Toronto at that French conference in Montreal. So departing from there would see us leaving by the beginning of June. Although it only includes one daily meal, Honolulu, Hawaii would be a good option for the kids since it has both shopping and swimming. But my own first choice, I've always wanted to see Australia. I guess that depends on how willing you are to blank. All right, I'm going to give you about 40 seconds. Read your answer choices and then use the diagram. Look at the words in the diagram. Try to figure out what the right answer is. We'll see if we get any answers here, and Ashwati can share them aloud. This is a tough one. How are we doing?
Hi.
Hi. Hello. Yeah, it takes some thinking, doesn't it?
I think I have the answer.
Of course, I'm going to give you some clues in a moment, but it's always nice just to try to work it through first on your own, I think.
Okay, we have some options coming in. Somebody said vacation only for a week.
Okay.
And then we have fly out of another city. That's option A. Yes, so option A, option A, option A. C. There's real confusion between C and A, looks like.
Okay, okay.
A lot of them, most of them are A, and then a couple of them said C.
Okay, so I tell you what, I won't quite reveal the right answer yet, but what I will do is let's just sort of go through the answers quickly, one at a time, and we might as well start with answer choice A since it's the first on the list. So I've just put a little question mark there to show us we're considering this option for now. So I myself, by the way, was the one that highlighted those sentences in green. On your real test, unfortunately, you can't mark up the computer screen. The best you can do is take notes with paper and pen. But as we're studying together as a group, I like to highlight things to bring your eyes to the attention. So again, that little green, those green sentences are leading into the answer choice. So if answer choice A is correct, Marion's email would read like this. It would say, I've always wanted to see Australia. I guess that depends on how willing you are to fly out of another city. So that's how that whole thing would come together if answer choice A is correct. So my question to all of you, and it's a really important one, is we need to figure out which keyword within the green highlighted section is going to tell us where we're supposed to look in the diagram. So think back to those 5 W's again, the who, what, where, when, and why. And if you look really closely at the green words there on screen, I hope this is how you did it. You saw the word Australia. So this is that where, that location detail. Marion is really keen on seeing Australia. And we already know that the diagram itself contains Australia as an option because we've already looked at this diagram. So we see the picture of that Sydney Opera House, and we also see the word Australia. So that tells us, again, this part of the diagram is really what's the most important piece. So that's where we'll spend most of our time trying to gather the right details to answer this question effectively. So that's sort of step one. Now, again, she says, I want to see Australia. I guess it depends, though, how willing you are, Sam, to fly out of another city. So the next question we have to ask ourselves is, well, what city would we be flying out of in order to land in Australia? It would be helpful for us to know that so we can determine if answer choice A makes any sense. And the diagram tells you flat out, it's not that difficult. We just look here and we see that the only city we could fly out of would be Ottawa. And that will take us into Australia. So with that information now, we need to determine, where do Marion and Sam live? If we could figure out where they currently live, we'll be able to assess whether they can fly out of their home city to get to Australia, or whether they're going to have to drive themselves to Ottawa first to get to Australia. So that's sort of the key piece to this puzzle. It's going to determine if answer choice A is correct or not. And so the only way maybe to figure out what city Marion and Sam currently live in is to return to the email that Marion has written. Can you take about 10 seconds of time? Let your eyes just scan quickly down over that email on screen. And I want you to pull out the city names that are mentioned. We're trying to figure out where Marion and Sam live right now. So if we can find the city names in this email, that's going to be helpful. I'll give you about 10 seconds, and then I'm going to circle the city names for us. Let's see if you can find them first.
So yeah, we have answers. There's Montreal, Toronto, and Montreal.
Yeah. Did you notice Honolulu too? Some people might have noticed Honolulu. All right. So I'm glad you found those as quick as you did. That's amazing, really. By the way, names of anything, whether they're people, places, or things, they all start with capital letters. And it's easy for us to find those words when we scan. Capital letters tend to jump off the page right at us a lot more easily than other words would. So we would notice these 3 city names, and very quickly, we'll just read what she's written here. She says to Sam, we'll be away from Toronto at that French conference in Montreal. So if they're going to be away from Toronto, that strongly implies that that's likely where they live right now. That's how I'm reading that. I hope that's how you're reading it too. So they'll be away from Toronto. If that indeed is their home city, they're going to have to get themselves from Toronto to Ottawa. So they would indeed be flying out of a different city in order to get to Australia. So I do think that answer choice A is correct for those of you that selected it. Okay, now if we're not 100% sure, again, they're away from Toronto. I'm quite confident that's where they live. She says they'll be at a French conference in Montreal. So they're only going to be working in Montreal. Honolulu is mentioned only in relationship to a possible vacation with the kids. So that doesn't seem to have any relevance at all to this question. So let's get rid of Honolulu. My only hesitation before we select choice A is because Montreal is mentioned in the email, and she does suggest they could depart from Montreal, right? So if we leave from Montreal, et cetera, et cetera. But when I look back at this diagram, when we leave from Montreal, which is right here in the diagram, we only land in Mexico. That's not helpful or relevant in any way, shape, or form. We're only focused on getting to Australia. That's what this whole question's about. So again, let's just ignore Montreal too. Let's get rid of all that. It's not relevant. So our initial inference, our initial assumption that they're very likely living now in Toronto, so we can see that they'll have to likely drive to Ottawa somehow and then fly into Australia. So that does logically correlate with flying out of another city to get into Australia. So that's kind of the logical standpoint you can use to answer this. Some of you might have done it differently. This next strategy I'm going to show you, honestly, could be even easier than that long sort of logical train of thought we've just discussed. Looking at those other 3 answer choices, there is a way to prove that they're all incorrect. So if you've got extra time on your CELPIP reading test, I want you to look at all the other choices. If you can prove them to be false and you're left with only 1 answer remaining, you can be very confident that it is the correct answer. So choice B, none of you chose it, but choice B says to stay in a 4-star hotel. And remember when we looked at this diagram earlier, we know the star rating is right there. So this one only has 3 stars. There's no way that choice B makes any sense. It doesn't match Australia. Some of you chose C, vacation for only a week. But remember, we were told how long the vacation packages would be in every part of this diagram. And that the Australian package is for 14 nights. That is 2 weeks. That is not 1 week. So there's no way choice C could be correct. And the last one says to wait until July to travel. Well, remember how all of the dates were down here? This one says from May to June. That's the only available option for Australia. That's not July, so that doesn't make sense either. So by eliminating those 3 answers, we're left with choice A. And again, logically reasoning that they'd have to leave their hometown of Toronto to get to Ottawa, to then depart to Australia. It all checks out. So choice A definitely is the right answer here. And when you select it, the computer will insert it like this. So that's an inference type question for your reading part 2, using logic and reasoning. I've got one more inference question for you here from this test, and I think this one will be a little easier. I'm curious to see if you can tell us in the chat box, what is the relationship again between Marion and Sam? So Marion is writing to Sam, that much we know. Can you quickly, you might need to skim read a few details here again in the email, but can you figure out what their relationship is? You know, are they neighbors? Are they coworkers? Are they family members? Are they married? Like what is their relationship? That's what we're looking for now. So I'll give you some time to think about that and maybe share some guesses in the chat box. Curious to see what you think.
First answer is a couple because they have kids together. And then couple,
Yeah.
husband and wife, couple, couple, couple.
Yeah, that's more or less what I thought too. We don't know for sure if they're married. They might just be common law, and that part doesn't matter. But I agree with you. I think that this is definitely some sort of a romantic relationship between Marion and Sam. And I agree that having kids, taking kids together on a vacation is probably the most helpful clue. There were some other context clues, though, that you might have noticed. So this one, the very first one, where she talks about earning us 10 times the regular jet miles points. So it's like an Aeroplan or an Avion, or there's lots of loyalty points for different companies. If you're collecting points, points take a long time to accumulate. And if you're collecting them with somebody to use later, in this case on a vacation, it's probably someone that you're in a relationship with. That would be more likely than collecting points with a friend. Although it's possible to do this with a friend, it's not as likely. And that's what inference skills are. It's choosing the best scenario from the options available. So again, they're routine. Yeah, go ahead.
Somebody pointed out, and you probably were getting to this, so I'm sorry if I'm like, raining on your parade. But like somebody said that they signed off love,
Yeah.
Which is another signifier that it's a couple.
Yes, that is also a dead giveaway. So the jet miles points, the kids as well, and signing the email with love, I think is also a really good clue. Again, somebody could argue, well, we do tell our friends we love them, which is wonderful. That's definitely possible. But when you look at these 3 details underlined for you on screen, and you put all of those context clues together, it paints a much stronger case for the fact that it's probably a relationship. I don't think they're just friends, right? So
it's also important to understand that that it's better for you to go with the most possible answer than we can always argue, oh no, but they could be friends who are taking care of children. Yes, that could all be possible, but you have to go with the most probable answer to improve your chances.
Absolutely. It's the big picture. It's putting these clues together. So Ashwati, I couldn't have said it better myself. That's exactly right. Never hinge your inference on one piece of evidence. If there are many pieces of evidence like we see here, look at them together and see the big picture. And that will help you answer more questions correctly than not. The actual test question for what we've just discussed is here on screen. So it says Sam is probably Marion's, and you can see the choices. Now, friend was not an option, so that actually made it easier for us. We can't even consider that since it's not an answer here. But if you had to choose between boss, brother, husband, or son, we would choose husband in this case, based on the discussion that we've all had, and then based on the clues in front of us. So again, another inference type question there. So you click on your answer, the computer does the rest and inserts the word for you. All right, so that's our reading part 2, manageable. Remember, reading parts 1 and 2 are the easier parts of your CELPIP test. By the time you get to reading parts 3 and 4, we're now entering intermediate to advanced level territory. So I think we're ready now to move on to that intermediate and advanced level territory, as you seem to be following along quite well today with our lesson. So we're going to segue over to text only, right? Part 2 has the diagrams, and we've talked about diagrams so far today, but part 4 has only text, like a newspaper article. So we're just going to look at the words on screen. In your CELPIP reading part 4, you're going to be given a news article, we'll call it, usually 4 to 5 paragraphs long. And it's going to provide, of course, the main topic of the piece, but it will also introduce you to possibly 2 to 4 different people. And all of these people, we have to figure out as we're reading who these people are, what their opinion is about the topic, and importantly too, why do they feel that way? So again, these are really high level skills. And in order to really correctly understand a person's position, we're going to take a very close look at both their actions and their dialogue. So anything we're reading about that tells us what these people are doing, or maybe what they've done in the past, that's going to be really important for us to understand. Also, oftentimes in your reading part 4, people have been interviewed and the actual words they speak is included in quotation marks. So anytime somebody has something to say, That's also going to give us a lot of really helpful information to read between the lines and understand the entire passage a lot better. We can also use these same inference skills to guess the meaning of unfamiliar words, by the way, because reading part 4 is advanced. So there probably will be words that maybe you don't know the meaning of. So we're going to practice that right now. Before we get to a reading part 4, again, ChatGPT gave us a really nice little tiny paragraph that we can work with. Again, I just went to ChatGPT and I actually said, please. I always use please, even with AI. I said, ChatGPT, please write me a paragraph that we can use to practice inference skills. And as you know, magically within 2 seconds, this is the outcome that ChatGPT gave us. So can you read this to yourself this time? I'll give you about 15 seconds. As you're reading it through, I really want you to understand what Emma's situation is, as I'm going to ask you a ton of questions about her. So try to get your mind around what's happening here first.
Are you expecting for me to share an answer with you?
We can, sure. I was going to guide some discussion points, but if you've got any ideas, by all means, you're welcome to share them now. Yep, we're going to.
Oh no, I mean like from the chat.
Yeah, sure. Go for it.
Okay. Okay. So if somebody shares anything through the chat, I will share that on screen. We haven't had anybody yet.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to ask my first question.
Okay. She walked. So the first answer is, or the first suggestion is that she walked into the office late. Latecomer.
Yeah, that's exactly
what I.
Yeah. Good. Okay. So how do you know she's late? What's the big piece of evidence there that suggests to you that she's probably late for work? What did she do? What action gave that piece of information to us?
So while we get an answer for that, somebody said she's very disturbed about an issue.
Maybe.
She's troubled. Okay. So for the action questions, we have avoiding eye contact, glanced at her watch.
Yes. Yeah. So let's do them in order, if you don't mind. I appreciate everybody jumping in, but sometimes when we just grab random details, it's hard to actually get the progression. So when we read, we go from start to finish. So basically, Emma walks into the office. The first thing we're told is that she's glancing at her watch. So what we should be able to do is put ourselves in Emma's shoes. So if you are arriving at work and you look at your watch, ask yourself this: why would you do that? Why would you glance at your watch as you're entering the office? And as you suggested, and logically so, it's probably to see if we're on time. Why else would you look at your watch at that particular moment? And the fact that after she looks at her watch, the very next thing she does is she quickly moves to her desk. So that tells us she's in a rush. So it backs up further the evidence that she's probably late, and she realizes she'd better get to that desk maybe before the manager sees her. And the fact that she's not even looking at her colleague, she's avoiding eye contact. To answer my question below here, how she's feeling, I think it's definitely a negative feeling. I think she's worried about getting in trouble. Possibly she's embarrassed that she's late. I get the sense, I don't know about you, but I get the sense that this is unusual for Emma. I think that she's normally a very strong worker with a strong work ethic, and I don't think she's late very often. And the reason I suggest that is because in the next part of this passage, we're told that her usually neat hair was slightly disheveled. Now, what does the word disheveled mean? Do not look it up on your phone. Don't do it. Look at these words on screen. Make a guess for me. Use the context clues. She's in a rush. She's rushing to her desk, and her hair is usually quite neat, but today it's disheveled. So can you guess what the word disheveled means? It's a pretty high-level word, but I think we could do it. What does it mean? What's a synonym? A simple word that means the same as disheveled. No dictionaries. Use the brain.
Who's
her hair is usually, yeah, her brain.
Unkempt. Oh, I like that.
Oh, did you use the dictionary, or was that your own word? Because it's a great word, but it's really
messy, scattered, Messy is a top option. Scattered, rough.
Okay, no. Yeah, scattered sounds like you've used a thesaurus because it doesn't have quite the right meaning for this context. So again, dictionaries aren't always going to help you. You need to look at context clues. So the best assumption here is that her hair is really messy or untidy. Those are the two most precise.
Untidy was an option.
What was the
Yeah.
one, sorry?
So untidy was one of the options. Disorganized.
Your hair, no, your hair is not disorganized. No. Okay. So that tells me that's come from a dictionary, that one, I think. Yeah. Okay. So if your hair is normally neat and today it's disheveled because you're rushing, really your options to be very accurate and precise would be it's messy, it's untidy. The hair is coming out of the elastic or it's all over the place, right? So again, that tells me that usually she's neat. Usually we're told she's cheerful, she's happy. She's got this cheerful demeanor, but today that cheerfulness is absent, right? So that's the evidence we're looking for. She's normally happy and neat. So she's probably normally on time as well. And the fact that she's not looking at her colleagues, I think she's embarrassed about being late and she just wants to get to the desk as fast as she possibly can before it's noticed. And the very last thing we're told is when she sits down, she sighs. And when you sigh, it's a negative emotion. You might be frustrated, you might be unhappy, and so on. And she starts to type furiously on her keyboard. Now, the word furious usually means angry, but I don't think Emma is feeling angry. I think in context here, when she's typing furiously on the keyboard, I think that the image that comes to mind is that she just gets straight to work. Her fingers start flying over that keyboard and she's typing those keys as fast as she can. Maybe we can hear the click, click, click of the keyboard as she's typing. And again, I suggest she's probably doing that to get right to work, to make up for the time she's missed by being late. Or if the manager looks over, they'll see that she's at work. So there's just so much information line by line by line that all add up to build this picture. So again, your inferences today were spot on. All right, we've answered these questions now, but I do encourage you very strongly that when you're working with the passage, do take the details in the order they're provided. Don't just jump around randomly, grasping at straws. That's an expression. Go through the detail methodically and see how the details start to connect and build that picture for you. That means you're not going to miss any relevant details and it's going to give you the most accurate image possible. Okay, so anyway, a little bit of warm up with inference skills as it applies to a paragraph. We're now ready for our last activity today. So we're going to take those same skills, but we're going to apply them to a CELPIP reading part 4, which again is the most advanced part of your CELPIP test. So we will have to make some inferences at some point. We will need to ensure that our inferences are accurate based on the information provided in the words in the sentences. So I'll quickly show you what a reading part 4 looks like, just so you can see the length of the passage. So that's here on the left of your screen. I hope the video is playing smoothly here today. It's not choppy, but the passage is on the left. And then you've got 2 sets of questions here on the right-hand side always. So top, bottom set. Here we go. All right. You have 13 minutes to answer 10 questions if this was a real test. So here's the passage that we're going to work with today. There are 5 paragraphs, and you can see I've numbered them just to keep us sort of on track with the time management plan. So what I'd like to do, here's paragraph 1. Again, this is very advanced level writing. So what I'm going to do for today is I'm going to read this paragraph out loud as it's the introduction. So by the time we're done reading this together, we should have an understanding about the main idea of this passage. And I recognize that maybe some of our viewers, we're not all working right now at an advanced level of reading, and that is okay. So what I'll do is as I read this to you, I'm going to just pause after each little part, and I'll quickly summarize and paraphrase in my own words to make it simple, so that by the time we're done this, we'll all understand what this passage is about. After that's done, you're going to do the work to answer the next question I have. So here we go with introduction to part 4. This passage says, annually, 1 in 10 people worldwide acquire, and 420,000 die from foodborne illnesses, according to the World Health Organization, or WHO for short. So all that means is that every year, lots of people get sick and sometimes even die because they eat food that makes them sick. That's all that means. And then the passage continues. It's small wonder then that DineSafe public health programs legally require restaurants to conspicuously post signs displaying food safety inspection results. So I noticed Dine Safe is written with capital letters, capital D, capital S. So I'm making the assumption or the inference that that's the name of the public health program, because I've never heard of the words Dine Safe either, like you. So I think that's the name of the health program. And what I'm understanding here is that when these safety inspections are done in restaurants, the Dine Safe health program forces the restaurants to post signs in the windows to let customers know if it's safe to eat there or not. That's what we've just read. Now, the rest of this passage explains what those signs look like. So the first sign we're told is green. So a green sign means substantial compliance with food safety rules. So green means go, it means it's safe to eat there. Yellow signals significant non-compliance. So yellow is caution. You might get sick if you eat here, you might not. Red indicates closure due to critical infractions like food contamination or pest infestation. So red is danger. Red means if you eat here, you are going to get sick and possibly die. So that's in a nutshell what this entire passage is all about based on the introduction. Okay, so again, there are several questions to answer here, but we're going to do the inference question. This is a different type of inference, but it's fantastic practice for our reading comprehension. So the test question actually says, which speaker used informality? So informal speech or informal ideas are words that are more casual and conversational. So when you talk to a friend or you text a friend, you're probably using slang expressions, sometimes idiomatic expressions. Again, it's at a very casual or maybe a simpler tone. The opposite of informal would be formal. And when we have formal speech in front of us, it's very high level, almost has an academic, professional type tone to it. So our job now, we've got 4 speakers' names on the screen in front of us. So this is a who question to start with. So we have to realize, in order to answer this question effectively, we're going to have to scan through the remaining 4 paragraphs of this passage. We have to look for these people's names. And when we find the person's name, we're going to have to read what they said. And then we have to assess whether the speech itself is informal, meaning is it casual, or is it formal? We're looking for the one speaker that used informal speech. So here's paragraph 2. I'm going to give you 15 seconds to scan with your eyes and find the one person's name in this paragraph. And then I'm going to circle it for you. So just look, names have capital letters. So hopefully that helps you pull it out. Don't read the words, look for the name. There it is. See if you can beat me to it. I'm going to circle it in about 5 seconds more. And I'm hoping you find it first. You ready? So here's the name that we see in paragraph 2. It happens to be Matthew Waite. So again, they're in random order. So we just have to be aware of that. So the moment we see Matthew's name, I'm going to now highlight in purple, just so it stands out, the words that Matthew says. And you should, as a reader as well, recognize those quotation marks. So anything within quotation marks, which are those lines before and after his speech, that tells us that Matthew Waite was interviewed, and these are the exact words that he said, which is helpful because we need to now read the words he said and determine if this is informal speech or formal. So again, I'll read it out loud to you just because some of these vocab words are quite high level. But as soon as I'm done reading it, I want you to tell us in the chat box if this is informal or formal, right? So Matthew says, a colored sign is just a snapshot of a restaurant standing at one point in time. Historical records are better because snapshots can mislead. A yellow sign, for example, could mask an otherwise pristine record. So does that sound sort of casual and informal to you? Or are there words and examples there that demonstrate to you that this is higher level, that this is more academic, more professional? It's got that, I guess, yeah, I always call it a professional tone. What do you think? Informal or formal? You've got a 50-50 chance, but I'm hoping you're looking at the words Matthew said. You're finding evidence to back up your claim. I'll open it up to the chat box and see if we get any guesses. And it's okay if you're wrong. We'll go through it together. But what's your gut telling you? Is this casual and informal, or is it formal?
Hello.
Mm-hmm.
Our first option. Oh no, it's not our first option. So formal and then it is not informal. So
Which
formal.
means formal. Yep. Yeah, makes
Informal,
sense.
because of the use of snapshot.
Yes.
Formal,
Yeah.
informal. So really like a mix.
Okay. So I like that one person also thought to give evidence. As you know, that was going to be my next question. This is formal for sure. There's nothing informal about that. This is very formal and high level. And we can look at some of the words here that Matthew Waite has included. Historical records, he cites, snapshots that mislead. When he even says, for example, he's giving evidence to back up his claim, which is a formal thing to do. And otherwise is an incredibly high level or formal approach that connects ideas together in that academic sense. And look at the vocab, pristine record. So everything here we assess is formal. Nothing informal, casual, slang, or easy about this. So we're just going to cross Matthew Waite's name from the list. He's not the guy. Guy is informal. He's not the person who is using informal speech. So we have to keep looking, is all that means. This is not the right answer. So we move on to paragraph 3, which is here. You've got 3 other names below. See if you can find the name in this paragraph. I will give you 5 seconds because it's easy. Do you see the very beginning of this paragraph? Mentions Frederick Richards, so you can't miss it. So the moment his name is mentioned, again, skip ahead just a little bit to where the quotation marks start, which is here. I've highlighted it in purple for us. Okay, so again, I'll read this out loud. I want you again to assess, is this informal? Is it casual? Is it conversational? If you do think it's informal, I hope you can find some examples of words that tell us it's informal. Or maybe the opposite's true. Maybe you think it's formal. I'll leave it to you to assess. So Richard says, the FRA should read the signs. They display both current and previous ratings. Anyway, pathogens are terrible at record keeping. E. coli from a good restaurant having a bad day will make you just as sick as E. coli from one with a long rap sheet. What do you think? Informal or formal?
Hello.
Remember, informal means casual.
We have. Okay, so I'm not. So we have informal, and we have formal, supports with facts and somehow scientific. Bad day. I don't know why they're giving me words. Bad day, and then informal. Pathogens are terrible at record keeping.
Yeah.
Long rap sheet.
This is the correct answer. This is informal speech. I think that the biggest, the strongest example of informal language that's used within Frederick Richards' speech here is this word. The moment you see, anyway, blah, 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 that's conversational. We would speak that way with friends, but if you're giving a formal presentation like we sort of are here, talking about food that could kill us, this is a very casual expression. Think back to Matthew Waite in that last paragraph. He was using words like otherwise, pristine records. And here we get, anyway, pathogens are terrible. So that's probably the biggest giveaway, I would say, to tell you, this is informal. And then the next layer to that, and this is where it gets a bit tricky because not all of you are going to understand the language device he's using. He's actually giving pathogens. Pathogens are the bacteria, we'll say, that make you sick. It's what you take into the body that makes you sick. And he is saying pathogens are terrible at record keeping. So he's basically humanizing pathogens. He's giving them human-like qualities, right? So a pathogen, there's no way it could keep track of how many people it's infected. So Richards is almost using sarcastic humor in a way to get his point across. And his whole point of saying they're terrible at record keeping is he points out E. coli, which is a precise type of bacteria. And he says that E. coli from a good restaurant having a bad day will make you just as sick as E. coli from one with a long rap sheet. So rap sheet is a very casual expression that refers to a criminal's past criminal record. So if somebody's arrested by law, they'll get a criminal record, and every single offense that they've ever committed is going to be included in that record. All right. So the record itself, or the criminal record, that's sort of the precise word for that in the component of law. But when we're speaking almost like slang and in a casual sense, we refer to that criminal record as a rap sheet. So again, the use of those words rap sheet tell you, this is casual. And E. coli, the bacteria, of course, can't have a criminal record. So once again, Richards is using a whole bunch of different language devices to kind of poke fun at the situation, to hammer home his point, to support his claim. So anyway, all of this is informal speech for sure, for sure. Okay, so he is a right answer. If this were my test, I would just stop there and choose Frederick Richards because I'm confident this is informal language, and I would move on to the next question. But since we're here, I'll take 1 minute more before we log out to show you the other two paragraphs. So this one's really short, and the name mentioned is Catherine Schmidtke. So she's not quoted as speaking, but we do find out her idea here. And all we're told is that she found the number of cited violations notched up slightly post-Dine save. You can see how high level and formal that is. So that's definitely not the informal speech we're looking for. And last but not least, Joseph Kowalczyk. He gets paragraph 5 all to himself, and he pretty much gets the entire paragraph. And I'll just read out the first half, and you'll see how, again, formal and high level this is. He starts talking, X followed by Y doesn't mean X caused Y. Cities grow, more restaurants open. The total inspection count thus naturally increases. Do you see that word thus? That's the same as otherwise. So these are formal conventions. He's not the answer either. It was Frederick Richards that said, anyway, right? So again, this is a very nuanced type question that people that have a grand understanding of vocabulary and what formal and informal speech looks like, the advanced readers, they would get this type of question correct. If this is a new concept to you today, that's okay. Hopefully you've learned something new. And I want you to keep the importance of individual word choice in the back of your mind as you're reading through these answers, especially on the harder parts of the test. Okay, I'll open it up to questions. Are there any comments there in the chat box, Ashwati? Or
Yes, there is a question relating to not the topic, but really how the process works. If we don't click on the next button, will it automatically save our answers in all parts of the CELPIP test once they move to the next part automatically? Thank you.
Yeah, so there is a next button at the top of each reading part. So if you finish all questions you've answered and you click next, you're going to move forward to just the next reading part, and everything you've answered previously is submitted for mark. You can't go back though. So if you do click next, it's too late to go back and make any changes to your answers. So bear that in mind. Anything you do answer into the CELPIP computer stream, it's going to be logged in to be marked by the computer anyway. So you don't have to submit anything. It gets submitted automatically. So whatever is logged as your answer, by the time the timing device reaches 0 for that reading section, those are the answers that are marked by the computer later. Yeah, great question. Good to know these things.
Okay. We don't. So if you have any questions that are, wait, are you done with the presentation, Manager?
Yeah, I was just going to conclude and come back to you. Yeah.
So maybe feel free to ask your questions. Any questions you have about the CELPIP test. If you have any specific questions about the comprehension lesson today, definitely ask us in the comments. Okay, so we're getting questions, but I'll let you finish.
Yeah, sure. I was just going to say, to sum up here, this is how you're going to be successful answering inference type questions on your CELPIP test and again in daily life. So we've talked today a lot about using our own prior knowledge of the world. So if you can put yourself in the shoes of the people you're reading about, or looking at a picture, if you can understand what you're looking at based on something that you've already experienced in life, that's a good starting point. The context clues will be either details in the pictures themselves or the words in the passages. So we need to pull out the correct words. We need to know where to look. That's the hard part sometimes, and pull out the relevant details. So if we can fully understand, how someone's feeling and why they feel the way they do, we'll be able to answer more questions correctly. So the actions people do, the words that they say, those are going to be crucial, especially in your reading part 4, which is what we just looked at. And another good way to practice this skill at home is, as you're reading anything, whether it's a novel for fun, I want you to start making predictions about what you think might happen next. Again, if you're into true crime and detective stories like I am, this is a lot of fun. So you're reading through the story or the passage, you meet a character who does something unusual. I want you to stop right there and make a prediction as to why they've done that or what's going to happen next. As you keep reading, I want you to assess if your inference or your guess was correct. If it wasn't, it's time to revise it. And that's really, really important. You might pick up clues down the road that you missed earlier. So putting all those clues together into one big picture is going to help you answer most questions, or more questions anyway, accurately on the test. So without further ado, I'll come back to you now, just in case we have questions about what we were talking about today. It is such a high level thing. Yeah, and we'll maybe just take down our screen if we could. There we go. Perfect. Okay. Do we have any big questions about reading today that we can get into?
We do, and I've asked for clarifications, but let's see if you need it. Okay. Okay, I got clarification. Are there specific types of text for each of the parts in reading? What they mean is, for example, is part 1 and part 2 informal versus is part 3 and part 4, or part 3 and part 4 more formal?
I don't know if I'd go formal and informal, but what I will say is that your reading part 1 is going to be the easiest, and it'll increase in difficulty until you get to part 4. So when I say increase in difficulty, it's everything that gets harder. So you'll increasingly get vocabulary words that are more higher level. You'll get more difficult types of questions to answer that require these inference type skills that are more intermediate to advanced compared to, say, part 1 as well. So it's not so much a formal or informal approach. It's more about just the skill set that you're being given in the passage itself and the types of questions that you're being forced into considering to answer. So think of it more as an increase in complexity. That would be more accurate, I think, than looking at it as formal or informal. Yeah, it always depends on the words in each passage to determine the formality.
Okay, thank you. So we don't really have any other questions. So if you have a question, like, ask us. Okay. How many questions do I have to get to enable me to get a band 10?
You will find that answer, Daphne, right on the website. I haven't memorized the score chart in my head, so I'm going to leave that up to you to figure out. So we can also put that into the show notes after we log off today. But when you go into celpip.ca and you look at like take CELPIP, and you have to scroll way down to the bottom. I know it's cumbersome, but there's going to be a reading chart that shows you the correlation between the number of questions you get correct and then the level that you're going to get. So there are 38 questions in total scored on all 4 parts of reading. I just off the top of my head can't tell you exactly how many you need to get level 10, but it'd be a pretty high amount, to be honest. Levels 10 to 12 are your upper intermediate to advanced. So you would need to get most of the questions correct in order to get up into that level. Yeah, but you can see the exact number right on the website. And again, we'll include it in the show notes later today to help you out.
Okay, more questions. Part 2 reading, are there professional work-related diagrams, like forms, etc.?
Maybe. I don't know. I can't speak to what might come out in a future test. Your reading part 2 is always going to give you a diagram to work with. So when I think of diagrams, it could be anything like the travel brochure we looked at today. It could be a transit schedule. It could be a syllabus, right, from a teacher on the first day of class. So when they say diagram, it's a very open-ended concept that involves both graphics, like images, pictures, and words. So if there is some sort of a professional document there that uses images and words, then yeah, that would be fair game for sure.
But I wonder if they're concerned that it's something academic or like too esoteric that they wouldn't know.
Well, CELPIP is the test of day-to-day language, so you're not going to have anything in an academic structure anyway. Yeah, so I wouldn't worry too much about that. Okay. And again, I honestly, if it were me, like I myself, if I was a test taker, I know I'm a teacher, it's easier for me to say, but if I was the test taker in this situation, I don't think I would even worry about what type of diagram I'm getting. Because if you look at the skills that we were talking about today, you should be able to apply those same reading strategies to any diagram that is presented to you. So again, whether it's a syllabus, a form, any type of graphic at all, the same language skills are going to apply. You're trying to relate to it through the images. You're looking at patterns. You're looking at the headings. You're looking at the type of information included. And there's always a pattern to it, like you saw today. You know, the price is always listed in blue and then the top middle of each part and so on. So those are the skills that you need to determine faced with whatever diagram's given to you. Yeah, so look at it that way rather than stressing out about the type of form you might get. Might be easier for you in the long run.
Okay, so we have 3 questions asking us about strategies to tackle part 3. And before I let you answer, Brandi, I will say that I encourage you, so like 3 of you have um, these concerns about part 3, and it's valid. I will say that you could definitely check out our test takers video. Sayali, she just wrote her test she just gave us her interview a few weeks ago, and she has very specific strategies on what worked for her for part 3 and part 4, because she also found it challenging. So definitely also take a look at that and see if that works for you. But I'm sure Brandi also has some strategies of her own.
Yeah, so the reason why we didn't talk about reading part 3 today is because you're not making inference skills in reading part 3, because reading part 3 is a matching activity. So your primary purpose there is to look at the 9 statements given to you and to determine which paragraph, if any paragraph, discusses that idea in its entirety. So I can do a lesson on reading part 3 in the future. I think given that we've been online together for quite some time and we're probably tired, it would be difficult to launch into a huge discussion now in part 3. It is a different skill set. But the best strategy I'll leave you with is that you do have to have a very widely developed vocabulary coming into this part of the test, because your success is going to hinge largely on your ability to match up synonyms and paraphrased ideas from the paragraphs themselves and the statements on the test. So people that can make those connections and recognize, oh, idea here is worded differently here, but they mean the same thing. That's how you're going to be successful. So people that really struggle here oftentimes struggle with the wording. The second piece to it is the time constraint. And I say this like a broken record, but you will not have time to read all 4 paragraphs for reading part 3 every single time you're trying to match up one of those 9 statements to the passage. So the effective strategy we have to come up with is finding a way for you to recognize immediately which of those 4 paragraphs is most likely going to contain information that discusses the details in statement number 9. And again, in our Reading Pro webinar, it's a free 2-hour webinar that we do. We just did it yesterday, as a matter of fact, so go figure. If you do want to attend that free session or watch the recorded version on YouTube, we take you through those exact strategies on how to determine where to look quickly to find the information you need. And I think, honestly, that's going to make a tremendous difference for a lot of people struggling. It's always knowing, and we did that today too, in a way. It's knowing where to look. It's knowing what types of details you need to understand in order to answer the question. And if you can do that, you're no longer wasting your time looking at other parts of the passage that just aren't helpful in that moment. All right. And that really separates the intermediate and advanced level readers who practice that skill a lot more from people who are working their way there. It just takes practice is all. And I know nobody likes to hear that. It takes time and it takes practice to develop these skills. But hopefully, if we do more episodes like this, it will give you all some ideas, and we'll keep moving towards that goal and get you up in the score chart if you can.
Okay, so we have a couple more questions too. In part 3, this is back to part 3, paragraph A and D seem to always have similar info. What can we do if we have the answers in 2 paragraphs?
Okay, well, I actually disagree with that. I think your introductory paragraph is just that. It's going to give you an introduction and general facts. Your concluding paragraph, paragraph D in this case, usually gives you more, it does give you an overview, similar in purpose, but you're going to have different details there. So you will not, and I repeat this to emphasize the point, you will not have a statement on the test that will be discussed in its entirety in 2 different paragraphs. That will never be the case. Each statement corresponds to 1 paragraph specifically, or it's not there at all, in which case you would select E. Yeah. So I hesitate. I wouldn't get too caught up in looking for patterns like that on your test. What I would do if it were my test is I would look at the precise 4 paragraphs given to me in reading part 3. I would then look at just the information in those paragraphs. I wouldn't mislead myself by saying, well, in other tests, I noticed this. You're setting yourself up for a disaster there, I think. Always look at the facts and just the facts in front of you, right? So recognize, yeah, paragraph A, that's an introduction. Paragraph D, that's a conclusion. That's a helpful strategy, but you will not have the same details in either of those. And that's a really important point to make right now. So I'm glad you've actually asked that question so we can clarify that for you.
Okay, so the last question is
It looks like a puzzling one.
It's a long question.
I
Is it advisable to do a practice test right away after finishing one skill module in Accelerate? I haven't purchased the practice test yet. I finished the reading part and switched to watching our live session.
Okay. Yeah. So what Camilla is asking about is we have it's an instructional product that's actually for sale in our online bookstore. It's called Accelerate. And there's one version that gives you all sorts of recorded videos of instruction for reading and writing. And then there's a separate product that does the listening and speaking. So since we're talking about reading, I assume that maybe that's what you're referring to. So you can do it a variety of ways. With the reading and writing material, there will be all sorts of, as I said, instructional videos pre-recorded by past teachers and animations and so on. It's a lot of fun, actually. You'll watch the videos on the different strategies for reading, and then there are some activities to complete to really help you practice those skills, sort of like we did together in class today, in session today. After you've done the entire reading module, all of the instructional videos and activities, you then have the option of completing an actual practice test for reading. From start to finish, I guess it would be parts 1 to 4. I think if it were me, I'd probably do the practice test for reading if I've just finished completing the Accelerate reading program, because those skills are fresh in my mind and I'm not distracted by other skill sets that I'll need for different parts of the test. So that's one strategy. You can see if it works for you. If you want to hold off on that and study other language elements and wait and do your practice test at the end, that could also work as well. So I think there's definitely more than one way to approach that. It really depends on your own learning style and what's easier for you. Most people seem to find chunking down larger functions into smaller bits more helpful. So rather than do a whole practice test that is 3 hours long and tests your ability in listening, reading, writing, speaking, why not, if you're just studying reading, why not try the reading test for now and really hone those skills? When you're happy with that, maybe move on to listening or whatever else is giving you grief. But yeah, lots of options there. I'm glad to see that you're actually looking at some of these products, Camilla. I know the Accelerate program is, we've had lots of positive feedback on that one because the videos are bite-sized. They're usually quite short. So you can whip through them on your own time in, again, a smaller amount of time. So it's easier to work into a study schedule. Yeah.
Thank you, Brandi. That's all the questions we have time for today. Thank you so much for joining us. As always, happy to see you.
See you next time. Bye.
So thank you, everybody. It was yet another really engaging session. A lot of you asked really good questions, but we have taken quite a bit of your time. So I'm just quickly going to go through the trivia question for today. The question was about, hang on, yeah. September's full moon is known as a harvest moon. What Canadian musician released an album called Harvest Moon? So we have the first person who answered was Tesson San, Neil Young. Congratulations, that is the right answer. I hope you did not Google it. Anyway, thank you so much for joining us. A lot of people have appreciated today's episode. Brandi will be happy to hear that. And please stay tuned for more episodes. Please also join us on our social media accounts, Instagram, Facebook, and then we have a community on Twitter as well. For it's like a Facebook group, but we created the group, so we have more authority on making sure that you're not having to deal with fraudulent accounts or any requests for like free tests without having to take the test. So definitely do join our community there. But until then, thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time.